they're allowing. So I will have to share it on my timeline. All right, we are live on Facebook, and I apologize, we're not live on the Virtual Fridays group, but I will record that and post it. We are live on my own page, so 5,000 people that don't really care about this particular event will get a chance to tune in. But if you are here and tuning in and you do care about this event, that would be awesome. So my welcome. This is Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series. My name is Timothy Gager. And my guest is Caroline Leavitt. And let me tell you a little bit about Caroline, if I may, if I can figure it out, because I'm just having a really bad, I'm having an issue with stuff. All right, here we go. See, that was a good trick. It put the Zoom inside the Zoom when I shared the screen. All right, so Caroline is the New York Times best-selling and USA Today author of Cruel, Beautiful World, Is This Tomorrow? Pictures of You, Girls in Trouble, Coming Back to Me, Living Other Lives, Into Thin Air, Family, Jealousies, Lifelines, Meeting Rozzy Halfway Through. Her latest book, which is the one we are going to talk about, except, you know, the world's out to get me. There we go. How about that? Her latest book is coming out in paperback in June. It's already available in hardcover. It is With or Without You. And without anything else from me, I'm going to turn it over to Caroline Leavitt. I think you're muted still.
Okay, I unmuted myself. Thank you all so much for being here. It's especially wonderful to talk to other writers because there's a kind of familiarity with everything that goes on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my book and I'm going to read a little bit. This is my book. Of course, it's mirrored upside down. And the thing about this book is, like, if you're all writers, so you all know that writers are usually haunted into whatever they're writing. At least that's what I believe. That's how all my books start, where something just is nagging at me, or there's some question and I want to know the answer to and I can't figure it out, so I try to write about it. And that was sort of the way with With or Without You. With or Without You is about transformation, sudden transformation. It's about a couple in their 40s who are reevaluating their lives, and one of the guy was a one-time rock and roll star, and his partner is a very practical nurse, and he's not so famous anymore, and she wants him to settle down and grow up, and they're kind of boozing it up, and they're taking drugs, and in the morning he wakes up and she doesn't, and she's in a coma, derailing their lives totally. But then, as I was researching, well, what happens in a coma, I found to my surprise that a lot of people actually can come out of coma with startling new talents. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be something I can write about. So I worked with this researcher in Cincinnati, and he told me that there are cases of people waking up speaking fluent Mandarin when they never were able to before. And there was a case of some man who woke up who kept telling his family, I need a violin. And they kept saying, but you don't play violin, why do you want that? And he kept insisting and insisting, so they brought him the violin and he started playing it like a virtuoso. And when he got out of the hospital, he became a concert pianist. I mean, he became a concert violinist. So I asked the researcher, how could this happen? And he said, well, we don't really know what happens in coma, except that your neurons are firing and rewiring. And we don't understand why. Maybe it's like cellular memory. Maybe you're just forging new connections, but it can happen. So that was one reason why I was writing this book. But the other deeper reason was because 23 years ago, after I gave birth to my son, I got really seriously ill. I was at NYU Medical Hospital and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And they thought that I was dying and that the best thing to do was to put me in a medical coma. So I was in a medically induced coma myself for 3.5 weeks. But they also had the bright idea of giving me something called a memory blocker so I wouldn't remember any of it. And the problem with that is that in order to process trauma, you really have to remember it. So I was sick for about a year. I was in the coma for nearly 4 weeks. But during that whole week, I had all these terrible triggers where I would walk into a drugstore and I would see a certain kind of skin cream and I would break out into cold sweat and I wouldn't know why. And my husband Jeff would stop me and say, well, you're having this cold sweat because that's the cream they use in the hospital. Certain colors, if I saw anybody wearing a brown and yellow and white shirt, cold sweat, panic attack, because that was the color of the hospital curtains. So I figured, well, I must have PTSD. So I went to a therapist and said, well, how am I supposed to get over this? And she said, well, you're a writer. Why don't you write about it? And, see what happens. So I wrote a book called Coming Back to Me, about a woman exactly like me who went in to have a baby, ended up in a coma. And it did not help. I still had the triggers. So I just sort of figured, well, something I have to live with. So 5 years ago, my husband had to go to Norway for 5 weeks as a journalist, and I was by myself. And I started getting all these triggers started coming back, and I was really terrified to go to sleep because sleep all of a sudden seemed like coma. So when my husband came back, I thought I have to go see a shrink again. I have to take take care of this. This is ridiculous. So I went to a different kind of therapist, and the therapist told me, well, you wrote the wrong book. You don't want to write a book about someone like you. You want to write a book about someone very unlike you. So I created Stella in this book, who's totally different than I am. First of all, she's a nurse. She's very practical. I'm a writer. I'm totally impractical. Second of all, she remembers everything, even in the coma, whereas I remembered nothing. She comes out of the coma with this incredible artistic talent. I came out of the coma just the same, except for the trauma. I didn't really have any artistic talent. So before we can talk about this, I just want to read you a few pages. This is from chapter 3, where Stella's in a coma and she remembers it. And the thing about this that I love so much is that through her, I got to experience what I had wanted to experience. I wanted to know what it was like, and nobody would tell me. So here we go. Chapter 3, Stella's in the coma. Stella floats. She doesn't have a body, though she knows it's there, apart from her on this bed. She can hear Simon's her boyfriend, talking to her, although she can't make out the words. The rise and fall of his voice continues. It confronts her. It's rich and almost gravelly, the way it had been when he was in his 20s, when she had first met him, and he was still smoking. Allergic to smoke, she had sneezed at his kisses, but he stopped for her. Now he says something to her more urgent, but she can't make out the syllable. It sounds like grrr. Bzz, he says, like the wings of a fly smashing up against a pane of glass. Even though she can't understand him, his voice soothes her. It's real and known and familiar. Simon, it's Simon. She wants to tell him how sorry she is that they argued, that they drank, that they took pills. She doesn't think he meant it about their dreams being different. It was just the storm raging outside. It was just her cold plugging up her sinuses. Plus, they were so tired of fighting about the same thing, so exhausted. But how funny, right now in this state, she doesn't have her cold anymore. Here, in this place, she isn't aware of her body and its functions. Breathing, sweating, peeing, they all seem part of another life to her. Something she used to do, but she doesn't do anymore. Wave bye-bye body. The thought of it makes her laugh, makes her glad she still has her sense of humor. At least she thinks she does. Mostly what she does now in this place is smell things. Something sharp like lemon whisked by her nose. Wait, she wants to say, please wait. But the scent fades and vanishes before she can really lock onto it. She hears sounds and she perks with interest. Feet pat on the floor, voices dip and rise and then grow silent again. She feels an elbow bumping against her, but she knows it can't be against her because how could she feel it? She dreams, but isn't so much that she's dreaming as that she feels she's actually there in her dreams, dropping down from one place to another. She doesn't bother to wonder why because she doesn't know if there are any answers. I'm here, she wants to say to Simon. I'm right here. Pay attention to me. She feels so sorry for him when she hears him crying. She can feel where he is by the heat in the room, moving closer to her, warming her. She can hear it too, little skips in his voice, the loss of control. He's like a color too, a soft gray blue. She wants to stroke his hair and tell him it's going to be all right. Don't worry, baby, she thinks. So she's never once called him baby in real life. Don't worry, baby. He's crying harder. He's not a crier. She's the one who weeps when they argue, who even tears up at the phone commercial in which that college kid finally calls his parents to tell them he loves them. I live with a wuss, Simon said, kissing her. The only other time she had known him to cry was when he invited his parents to Manhattan for a visit to hear him play. Simon had planned a monologue introducing his father to the crowd. He was even going to make his dad stand up, make him proud, but his father never showed up. And there on the way, when Simon was singing, his eyes were wet. Everybody thought he was crying because he was feeling the song, the emotion of it. But Stella knew he was crying about his father. It stung. Simon never stopped trying with his father. She tries to remember Simon's father's name. Michael, she thinks. Fred, Frank, Bob. Names swim around her mind. Ricardo, Henry. None of them feel right. She tries to dig deeper in her mind to find a name, but it's not there. She isn't afraid right now. That surprises her. To her, being helpless was always the absolute worst. Babies were helpless, but that's not the same. Babies respond to care and love, and helplessness was their natural state. But as a nurse, she knows that true helplessness is a lack of power. The patients with locked in syndrome, the ones who are paralyzed, that really scared her. She tries to move or can't. But maybe she's moving, but it feels totally different to her. She doesn't have limbs. She hears Simon playing music. No one knows, someone says. No one knows what, she says. The voices blur and then fall silent. I'm here, she thinks. I'm here. Hello, hello, hello. And that's it. And that's one of the parts that really, really impacted me because it was so much fun to imagine it because of the memory blockers. I kept thinking, what if I had had a near-death experience and I couldn't remember it? That really pissed me off because I wanted to remember that. So, oh wait, I can't hear you, Tim. You're muted.
There we go. Have you ever considered like had a what if moment? Because your own coma that you were in, and obviously it shows up in your books. You ever had with your writing a what if moment? Like if you hadn't had a coma yourself, would you still be a writer? Or the books
Yeah,
something else?
there would be another trauma to take its place. I mean, I always think that writers always have these stories, and part of the reason why I think I can be so happy in my regular life or kind of silly is because I put the trauma on the page. I had a horrifying childhood. My adolescence wasn't really much better, and various tragedies and terrible things happened. But I found that when I wrote about them, as all of you probably know, when you write about them, you give it shape, you give it meaning, and then it doesn't hurt so much, and it's not as terrible. So I always would have been a writer. That was my writing started out as my escape when I was a little girl, so I could just hole up in my room and I wouldn't get hit or whatever. And then it became a way for me to understand the world. Isn't that it that way for you?
I get it, but I've interviewed writers on this program, and we've had like people that just strictly do research and get their novel out in that way. So I know that when you're promoting and talk about your book, do you ever wish that you did it any other way so you didn't necessarily have to talk about the you in the writing process?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I don't know. I think if I wrote nonfiction, then I wouldn't have to talk about the personal stuff, except for me, because I really wasn't allowed to have a self when I was a kid. It's important for me to get the you out. It's sort of like I sort of feel like, well, I'm an open book. I'll tell you anything you want to know. But when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to do that. If I said anything, it was bad. So I guess I don't mind talking about the you and the stuff because to me it's really liberating. It's sort of a screw you to my childhood when I couldn't, that I can now.
Well, one of the writer phrases you have is you have to go there. Does it frustrate you when you read something you know they're not going there?
Yes, that's another, what a great question. That's a fabulous question. Yes, and you can tell when people are not going there, when they're sort of skimming over it. You sort of know. And a lot of times it's when somebody's too nice or they don't want to say something that's sort of ugly or shows them in a bad light. And the thing is, you have to go there because when you go there, there's always going to be a person out there who's going to say, oh my God, me too. Thank you so much for saying this. I was afraid to do it. And you went there for me. It's sort of like writers are like the canary in the coal mine where we take in the, the gas in the coal mine and die so you don't have to. And but that also makes us, it gives us a rebirth too. But that's a really important thing you said. You have to go there. I always say it's like putting the blood on the page, like cut open your forehead, let it spill out, you'll feel better, other people will feel better, and that's how it'll become universal when you dig down and you get those things on the page.
Well, John has a question which relates to this. How do you know that you've interpreted your experiences meeting correctly?
I get a gut feeling. I just when I start I know it's not there. I have to rewrite and think about it and sometimes dream about it. And it's almost like when the same sort of terror comes up or sorrow or panic or whatever it is, it's almost like I can sort of pull myself away and look at it and think, okay, that's the feeling. I mean, you have to, it's like, I always say it's like Ulysses who has to go into hell and witness all this stuff, but he comes back up again. And if you know, well, it's not the same event, I can come back up again, then it feels a little bit safer. So you can do that.
So you can find a sweet spot in writing about trauma.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great way of putting it. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to something else. Now, your ninth book you wrote was rejected because your publisher that rejected it said that it just was not special. So,
Yes.
what was your initial reaction, and what's your reaction about that after it kind of settled in?
Great question. Totally great question. Well, my first novel was published when I was in my 20s. And I had won this young writers contest and I was sort of the flavor of the month. And I was sort of famous with the first book. And I thought, oh, it's always going to be like this. And it wasn't, to my great surprise. My second novel did not do as well. My third novel, my publisher went out of business. I kept being able to sell novels, but nobody was reading them. I'd get like maybe one review and it would be a great review, but nobody was picking up the books. So I was writing pictures of you and I submitted it to my editor at the time as part of a 3-book deal. And she did indeed call me up and say, Caroline, we're not going to publish this. We just don't think it's special. And I froze. and I felt totally sick. And I said, "Why can I make it special? Can I rewrite it?" And there was a silence, and she said, "Nobody here thinks that you can." And I said, "Well, would you look at something else that I've written?" And again, there was a silence, and she said, "No, we're not really interested in publishing you anymore, but best of luck." So I hung up the phone, and I was hysterical because, first of all, if you haven't made it by your ninth book, nobody wants to publish you. Nobody knew who I was. I would go to parties with my friends, and my friends they had careers and they had won prizes, and people would say, "Oh, Caroline, what do you do?" And I'd say, "I'm a writer," with a question mark. And then there would be the inevitable questions. "Have I heard of anything you've done?" "No." "Have I read anything you've written?" "No." So I called my agent up in tears, and she said, "Don't worry, we'll find you somebody." And I knew that was not going to happen. So I called up all my friends, crying to them. And one of them said, "Look, I have this editor at Algonquin, and this might be something she'd like. Is it okay if I talk to her about you?" And I
Who
said,
was
"You
that?
can." Who was it? It's the wonderful woman named Andra Miller. She's no longer at Algonquin. She's now at Random House, Valentine. And she said she'll look at it. And I said, "Okay, you can." So Andra actually called me outside of 2 weeks, and I was on the phone, like thinking, well, this is just nice. She's calling me to say thanks, no thanks. And then I realized she was pitching me the publisher, and I had to stop her because I'm an honest person. And I said, "Andra, I have to be honest. I don't sell books. I don't. My first book sold. Everything after that, nobody knows who I am." And she started to laugh, which really surprised me. And she said, "You know what? You're going to sell them now." And she made an offer for the book, and I was flabbergasted. And the thing about why books sell and why they don't, I've come to learn it has so much to do with publicity and who publishes you. Algonquin happens to have this extraordinary publicity machine. They went out and they got that book into six printings before it was like 6 weeks before it even came out. The week it came out, it was a New York Times bestseller. And I was on the floor. I mean, when I got my first royalty check, I looked at it and I thought, "Oh, they made a mistake. I have to pay them this money." And it was, but the funniest thing is that the week that I was on the New York West Times list, all of a sudden, people who wouldn't take my calls before suddenly were calling me. And they were, I was getting interviewed and I was on TV. And then all of a sudden I got an email from the editor who had rejected me. And I will try to not make this gross, but she thought I was her doctor, not her former client. And she had this really gross personal thing that was happening in her anatomy. And she was telling me about it. And I thought, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And I decided, okay, I'm going to be one with the universe. I'm not going to comment on it. So a few days passed, and then she wrote me again. And the gross problem had gotten even more specifically gross. And I thought, okay, I have to respond to her. So I responded to her and said, "Hi, look, I think you sent this to me when you mean it for your doctor. I just wanted to let you know." And she wrote back immediately and she said, "Oh, thank you for telling me. How are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing great. I'm on the New York Times bestseller list for that book you rejected." And she never responded. She never responded to me after that. So it turned out that it actually was great that I got this later in my career, because I learned that fame doesn't mean what you think it means. It really doesn't. I mean, it's nice. The only thing I can say about it that's really nice is that I was able to get another book deal because of that one. And I think any writing career, you have to know it can go like this. And all of it has to do with marketing, luck. A lot of it is luck, being in the right place at the right time. And we're all writers. I tend to think we're all writers and we're all swimming in the same sea. Some of us get a raft, and that's not necessarily because we deserve that raft on the sea. It could be because we had a really good publicist, or
What did What did Algonquin do that other people didn't do with your previous
They were
books?
amazing. First of all, they carted me out everywhere. This was way before the pandemic. So I was at BEA, which is the big books, book thing. And they carted me around and introduced me to everyone. And they would say, oh, this is the head of uh, Publishers Weekly. This is Caroline, our new author. This is her book. It's so good. You have to read it. And if the person like said, oh, how nice, and looked like they were going away, their marketing person would take them by the hand and say, no, listen to me. I'm telling you, this book is really special. You have to do something with it. And they kept doing that and creating buzz and putting me on the radio. And they never stopped. And they did all kinds of really creative publicity. And they just literally never stopped. So what I always tell writers is that when you're with a publisher, it's not always the advance that's important. Algonquin, their advances are okay, but they're not the $200,000 ones that Random House sometimes gives. But the difference is Random House, if you're not on the list in your first week, they're going to turn to another writer because they have 8 million writers. Algonquin, if you're not on the list on the second week, they're going to think, what haven't we done? What can we pour money into? They pour all their money into, they tour all their writers, they give you ads every place. They just pay real attention constantly and consistently. And it's sort of the main reason why I'd never go, I'm not going to leave them unless, you know, they kick me out
You sound
because
really.
they're smaller and they're great. They're a fantastic publisher.
Now, when you were told back by the editor that lost out on you and that you were not special, did any part of you try to turn that into a fact for yourself? Did it cause any self-doubt?
There's always self-doubt. There's always self-doubt. There's a really famous story that another writer tells. It's actually a story from Anne Lamont. She was friends with this guy who was a big deal in the movies, and he won an Oscar finally for best whatever the category was. And he got on stage, gave his speech, and the next day he called her and she said, so John, how do you feel now? You got that self-doubt away? And he said, the truth is, Annie, that it went away for about 10 minutes and now it's back. And I think that's the way it is with writers. I mean, for that, I don't, I sat and I thought, were my other 8 books before the 9th book really that bad? Or, was that 9th book really that much better? I don't think it was. I think it was just, I was in the right place at the right time and I was able to transcend that. I mean, I don't know. It's like I'm always filled with self-doubt. Always. I've just learned to live that that's part of being a writer. For me, anyway. Oh,
Well,
someone said imposter syndrome. That's right.
with that self-doubt, do you think there's 2 ways to deal with it? Because I always feel like either it will kick you in the ass to be like, no, I got to overcome this, or you can pack it in. Is there a middle ground there?
I think there is. I sort of, I mean, I let myself feel it at first, so then I will feel terrible and the self-loathing comes on and I think, I need to go to dental school. And then I think, okay, I've been through this and before, and in the end, the only thing that really matters is what you yourself think of what you're doing, and then it'll spread out and people will appreciate it. And I've come to know that my journey as being part of a writer is always the self-loathing, then the self-doubt, then the terror, and then you have to be careful because you don't want to feel like you're only the kind of writer who feels good when other people tell you you're good. You have to be the kind of writer who feels good about your work when it's just you and the page, and usually that's the truest way to feel of all, I think.
So I think this might be a legal question from Barbara. Do you get the rights back to your books, your older books, to republish them, or are they kind of, once they go out of print, they're gone?
Oh, I got them. There's something called reverting the rights. I got reversions for all my early books, and all the earliest books I sold to Zank. They have something called ePrints where they put them all in digital copies. So and anybody can get them. And I did that with all of my books except my third book, which was actually really a terrible book. It was, I'm not even going to tell you the title of it because this book was, I had a new publisher and this is another story about why you should stay true to yourself. They wanted me to write something really commercial. And I said, oh, I don't know if I can. I don't know what that means. And they said, well, we'll give you the plot and we want you to write it. And it was a really stupid plot about three people, like a love triangle. And I wrote it and I really never felt it. I knew it wasn't a good book. And that book came out and it got two reviews. That's all. And both reviews were terrible, terrible, like the worst reviews I ever got. And I remember I stayed in my apartment for a month after because I was so shamed. And only recently did I go back and look at that book and look at the reviews. And I thought, oh my God, that review was right. It's a really bad book. It's a book I should never have written. And it taught me a lot and it's fine. But it was a bad book. So that one I'm not reprinting.
So what can you do if a publisher says, here's the plot we want you to write, do this, or we're not going to work with you?
Yeah, that's sort of what they said. That's sort of what they said. It was kind of, I would come up with ideas and they'd say, why don't you throw in this? And I was so desperate to have a deal that I said, okay, I'll do that. Now I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. But back then I would.
So you can get a little more leverage at this point. So I mean, it's
Who knows? I mean, publishing is so weird now, as all of you know, that the rules have all changed. Now they want writers to have platforms, which is, they want you to have a following before they even look at your
we
work.
had we had Marty Beckerman on a few months ago, and yeah, he said the same thing, but he also saw a study that platforms don't sell books. Like
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
that's a not a like a relationship that really means anything. Your platform does not go into book sales.
Right. So what does he think does sell books? Word of mouth, probably, right?
Word of mouth and going out and just doing it the old school way. People want to buy you. They don't necessarily want to buy the
Right,
your product.
right, right. Yeah, but the funny thing about that now is that like authors aren't touring, they're not going out in person. So it's sort of, I don't know if anybody knows the facts yet on, do Zoom sell books? I mean, I just think it's who knows?
Everyone here is going to buy your book, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I will give everyone who buys it, I will give you a handmade by me book plate for free. Just send me your address and I'll mail it out. Um,
Yeah,
my
I mean,
email is
I don't think my Twitter account where I like hate the former president is going to sell any books. That's and in fact, you can probably do damage if you get political or you pick a side,
right.
you're like
Right,
splitting
that's true. You can, that's an interesting thing. There are some publishers who make you sign something where you're not allowed to say certain things or get too political or too nasty on social media, because you do become a persona, which is which is weird. Oh, someone said, would it have hurt your career to have said no?
and that was just
Um,
the publisher that gave you your
yeah, it would have back then, but times were, yeah, it would have back then. They probably would have said, well, then no deal. But I don't know if that happens anymore. Publishing seems very, very different to me now than what it was. And, I just sort of want to, I don't know, I just want to stay with the same publisher because the thought of going out and looking at, I see people how they do the submissions and trying to get an agent and all that, and it's heartbreaking, some of it. I will say though, the persistence does pay off.
My last question before we wrap it up with you, Caroline, is the old, you have the paperbacks being promoted in June. The hardcover came out months before. For you and promotion and to pitch your own book for sales, what's your expiration date? In other words, I always thought it'd be difficult to be like, okay,
Um,
back now, here we go again.
I don't know. It's like they used to say that expiration dates for books were just 3 months, but it's not that way anymore. I mean, I think that the thing that I do is I don't like to be seriously promoting a book all the time. But what I do is I write a lot of essays, so therefore I can get the essay out. On the bottom of the essay, it says, my latest book is With or Without You, or whatever it is. So if people want to, they can buy it. Um, I talk a lot to people, but a lot of times I will talk about stuff that has nothing to do with me or my book. I'll give a lot of talks about craft or writing or, agents or whatever else. I try mostly to be a good literary citizen, and that's how the promotion is done, rather than, there's something untoward. You do see people who are promoting themselves all the time, and there's like 18 posts about their book, and after a while you feel like, that's enough is enough. So
So here's
what?
the latest. So the paperback will be out in June. The hardcover you can get today. And I usually ask our guests what your favorite indie bookstore is to order this online, because they're kind of hurting during these times.
Yes, they are. I love Little City Books, which is Hoboken's bookstore, which is 2 blocks away from me. They're totally wonderful, and I also really love Books Are Magic in Brooklyn.
The
Oh,
Nick
wait, are all of you in Boston? If you're Boston, I love Brookline Booksmith is wonderful. Newtonville Books is still around. Yes,
Yes,
they're
Gager is
wonderful.
still running it.
Yeah, any indie bookstore, they're all fabulous.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you
being
so
our
much.
guest and reading and answering questions. Now, if you're watching the live stream, we do this every week. But if you want to be on the open mic, please use the Zoom link the next time. But I do appreciate, and I'm sure Caroline appreciates you viewing in. So until next time for you folks.